problem. So there's
This meeting of the Margate Planning Board is called to order. Please stand for the flag salute. Attention, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tom Collins.
Here.
Clem Wozleski. Mike Richmond. Jim Galantino. Margaret Gubernalti. Mike Cristaldi. Craig Palmisano. David Carter. Despina Hess. Remy Pelosi. Joe DiGirolamo. Rich Patterson.
Here. This meeting is being held in accordance with due public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the press, and a copy of same has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Okay. 6 months ago, Margate was given state and federal grant money under the Post-Sandy Planning Assistance Grant Program. Phase 1, to conduct 3 major studies: environmental design for the Amherst Avenue Business District, environmental design of the beachfront area, and environmental design of the bayfront area. The city sent out an RFP. What's an RFP?
request for proposals.
The city sent out a request for proposal, received proposals, and selected Arthur Ponzio and Associates and Mazer Planning Consultants, a joint venture, to conduct the studies. After numerous staff work sessions, there was a presentation to the Planning Board on September 17th, and the Planning Board members responded with comments and suggestions. Tonight, Ponzio Mazer will make a public presentation of the final version based on those Planning Board comments, and the public, as well as the Planning Board, will provide their input. After the presentation, we will hear comments from the public, and then the Planning Board members will have time to comment. At the end of the evening, the Planning Board will decide whether the study is ready for recommendation to the City Commissioners for adoption, or if further changes are needed. I will turn the presentation over to Arthur Ponzio and Associates and Mazer Planning Consultants. We ask all parties to use the microphone and speak slowly and clearly. It's a directional mic, so just point it towards your mouth. John?
Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is John Barnhart. I am a licensed professional engineer, licensed professional planner, and a certified municipal engineer in the state of New Jersey with the firm of Arthur Ponzio Company and Associates. I have tonight with me, as part of our team that worked on the Post-Sandy Planning Grants project, Bill Ponzio from the firm of Arthur Ponzio Company and Associates, and Gerald DeFelice, who is from the firm of Mazer Consulting. As Mr. Patterson just pointed out, the study that we went through essentially was comprised of 3 different elements. The first element dealt with the oceanfront bulkhead conditions and beach conditions. The second element dealt with the bayfront bulkhead conditions, as well as water depths and a bathymetric survey that was performed as part of that element. And the third element of the project was concepting/master planning a portion of Amherst Avenue known as the Amherst Avenue Bayfront area. Together with the 3 studies that we prepared, we then developed a set of some ordinance recommendations that are relevant to the data that we collected as part of those 3 studies. We're going to start with Bill Ponzio, who will just briefly explain to you the scope of the surveys that were performed with regard to the beachfront and the bayfront and the Amherst Avenue area. From that point, Jay DeFelice will come up and run through the Amherst Avenue concepts, and then I will wrap things up with the ordinance recommendations in concert with the comments that we received from all the board members since our last meeting, so that we can hopefully go through those, have specific discussions on items that were of concern, and come to a consensus on how to move those elements forward. So we will start with Bill Ponzio, who will describe the scope of our survey services and the work product that we were able to provide the city that's going to be, I think, a great tool for the city of Margate from here forward.
Good evening, everyone. Like John said, I'm Bill Ponzio from Arthur Ponzio Company, and I'm here to talk about the as-built surveys and base mapping we put together for the Sandy project. Behind you on the wall, there are going to be 11 sheets of surveys depicting Margate City from Coolidge Avenue all the way to Fredericksburg. And task one of this phase of the work that we prepared was to obtain and collect depths in all the bay areas of Margate City, and the plans that are going to be shown on the wall reflect that data. I'm not going to go into heavy detail of it, but you can just see it on the wall behind you or in front of you, whatever it happens to be. So, these are the sheets. I'll go through them. You can just briefly see all the homes depicted are shaded in, and the land as well, the street system. And in the water area, you can see there's contours that have been generated based on all the data we had collected. This information will be useful going forward for Margate. You'll be able to see areas that need to be dredged, and there are definitely areas that are in need of dredging, and everyone is well aware of that. Just to quickly highlight these areas, on sheet 2, on the lower left corner, that's where the Marina District starts, at around Coolidge Avenue. All the way from there to Fremont Avenue is in major need of dredging. We're all familiar with that. At the top of the sheet, you can see Fremont Avenue where it starts to angle. There's been a long-term sandbar out there that angles along with the street and ties into Union Avenue right there. The point out at Union, there's plenty deep, no worries there. The other area of concern is just at the top of Thurlow Avenue at the entry to Sunset Canal. There's a very steep slope in the bay, and the waters go from about 40 feet to 4 feet deep. That's the second area, or third area of concern. Sunset Canal, the mouth of that canal is in need of dredging. Orient Canal is in more need of dredging. It's heavily shoaled at the entry to that canal. And the area I'll talk about next, I call the log cabin. That's at large sandbar, would be on the right, to the right of the little graph that's there on the survey. Everyone's well familiar with that area. You look at you can look at that sandbar when you come over the Margate Bridge, and you can see the earth exposed at pretty much mid-tide. So that's in dire need of dredging. As you work through the Margate Bridge, those properties are, they have depth there, there's no worries. And as you get to the Bayshore Lagoon, again, major need of dredging. Everyone knows that. It's no surprise what the survey found. So that would be what I'll call phase 1 of the as-built surveys we prepared. Phase 2 was to collect the elevations of all the decks and bulkheads along the bayfront. We talked about that last time and went through some elevations. Tonight I'll just, refer to the plans, and if anyone wants to look at them later in detail, I can go through those elevations with them. Skipping along to sheet 8, this is where we began the beachfront. Again, the task here was to collect the elevations and depict the structures of the bulkhead and decks on the plans. And as you can see, they're represented behind or in front of you. This study along the ocean front went from Coolidge all the way to Fredericksburg, just like the bay. And we tied it back to Atlantic Avenue, which is depicted on the top of the screen there, sheet number 10. And the Atlantic Ocean and beach is on the bottom of that sheet. And the information you see up there, which is in the beach area, they're topographical elevations. And as you go through the sheets, you can see some areas of dunes, which were also depicted on the plans. All the base mapping that you see was provided by aerial survey, and that was all obtained in May of 2015, excuse me. And so it reflects a pretty current condition, as for what we have right now. So after we obtained all this information, we sat down and started going to the next phase, which Jay's going to talk about, which was Amherst Avenue. And then we get into further ordinance recommendations that John's going to speak about later on. And turn over to Jay.
Obviously, you can see from the data Bill just presented, we were able to obtain basically the elevation of every bulkhead and every deck along your oceanfront, your bayfront, and have a solid understanding of all of your water depth conditions along the entire bayfront of the city of Margate. That's a work product and a tool that the community is going to be able to use from now into the future for a lot of different things. What we've been able to derive from it is the recommendations that you'll hear about in the ordinance recommendation section, specifically dealing with bulkhead heights and deck heights and the things that I'll be discussing later. As far as the next section of the presentation is concerned, Jay's going to take it from here. We're going to walk you through the Amherst Avenue Business District. And this is a further development. We've added some items of discussion from the last time that we were here before you, which I think will probably generate some specific discussion from the board members based on some of the comments that you made.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. We had gone through some of this. I'm sure you will remember we had talked about a number of items with regards to the Amherst Ave Business District. And we had talked about, in particular, the ambiguous width of the travel lanes now at 27 feet. What we were kind of asked in between that meeting and now was, did we consider making this section one-way? And we wanted to share with you some things from our study where we did evaluate the option of possibly doing one-way traffic heading south from Washington to Coolidge. What it allowed us to do, and you can see here in the sketches, we looked at that because the intention was, by making it one way, do we pick up any parking? And once we were all was said and done, the answer was no. We moved some parking around, but because of the angles spaces, we ended up pretty much losing a few spaces, but there wasn't any net appreciable gain to doing that. The other thing that we had looked at is what the one-way parking would do is allow you to make the travel lane smaller, which would then be enough for us maybe to expand the width of the promenade from what we had talked about, which was roughly somewhere in the 8 to 10 foot, to something more in the 12 to 15 foot. So it would allow us a more prominent promenade. But when we stepped back and looked at it, the problems are that by doing it one way, it's only going to be one way for 5 blocks, and you're going to have people coming north on Amherst, that everyone's going to have to make a right onto Coolidge, and then all the traffic at Washington, everybody's going to have to make a left onto Washington who's coming south on Amherst. So it didn't seem like there was any real positive gain to this. And the other part of the discussion was the possibility of doing a bike lane, and we don't really pick up enough room to do a bike lane, and the other part of that would be that, you know, building a bike lane for 5 blocks if you were going to develop a bike trail system, that's something that really needs to be done as part of your master plan re-examination, where you could look at where your road widths are sufficient for bike lanes, what directions, are you setting up a loop, are you, where are people going to and from? So there's a number of issues with that, as opposed to just, this was more about, the study that we did was more about how can we take the existing right-of-way, which I believe we had showed you this before, where you see we've taken the 3-foot that's kind of behind the existing parallel parking spaces and added it out to the promenade. The other part is, this is the existing bulkhead here. The new bulkhead is allowed to be 2 feet to the water side. So that's how we're basically making the promenade without making angle parking or without making it one way. Because the other thing that I wanted to point out was, on this one, was that with the pull-in spaces here, we still need the 24 feet here. Like just think about a mall parking lot. You have the 20-foot space, yet you need that 24-foot space to be able to pull, especially the larger trucks and things, out. So we can't really make the roadway narrower with the straight pull-in spaces, because we need that entire width for cars to be able to maneuver. Does that make sense? Okay. So the idea was that the traffic calming aspects of the design, this is just the overview which we had talked about, which is where the promenade runs along, and then it goes from Coolidge to Washington. Now, in this slide, you can see where this one property has already extended the bulkhead. So that is roughly where the new bulkhead is going to be along the whole entire stretch. So you can see now that the situation that's happening is the fence is behind the existing bulkhead. You know, we could pick up 2-3 feet in here. All this is predicated upon the fact that the bulkhead needs to be replaced and that there will be a new elevation recommended for the height of the bulkhead. And this is what you see here, is that the promenade comes down. The other thing,
Other than the height difference, to say the bulkhead needs to be replaced, is the bulkhead in bad shape as it stands anyway?
yeah, at the present time, it's our understanding that the bulkhead's in very bad shape
Okay.
from the water side.
There's a priority list for what you need to do along Amherst Avenue. Priority list number 1 is deal with the existing condition of the bulkhead. It's in very, very poor condition.
Okay, good.
Uh,
Well, not good, but you're not doing this just to raise the bulkhead, you're doing it because the bulkheads need to be replaced
The
anyway.
bulkhead needs to be replaced extremely badly. It's in very poor shape for the majority of the length of that area of Amherst Avenue. So while that's happening, the bulkhead gets raised, you pick up the additional feet, additional space for the promenade. It just kind of works chronologically for you.
Yeah, and so what we had come up with here is that the other thing that works well as a traffic calming, if we're going to keep the two-way, we're going to keep the 24-foot wide two-way traffic. It's been proven that by doing each of the street ends is not supposed to have parking within the 15 feet of the corner. So the idea here is to do bump outs at each corner of the block, which then, combined with the street ends, doing some types of treatments at the street ends here, you see this a little clearer here, allows for two things. It allows for safer pedestrian access to crossing the street now, because the walkways are now aligned with the sidewalks on the side streets. And these types of applications tend to naturally slow people down. They feel the roadway is still the same width, but they feel that it's narrower because you have these curbs coming out from the sides, and it naturally slows people down. I mean, this is something that has been proven in many cities. I mean, you see it in Philadelphia, you see it in New York, and it definitely works. So our idea here is you would lose a couple parking spaces on, I think it's 3 or 4 of the street ends, Jefferson, Monroe. But other than that, we're not really taking away any of the existing parking. All this parking's already there. You're not supposed to park here. And we're just basically taking out a few spaces which are kind of ill-advised being located, so you're backing out into an intersection. And setting up a situation now where the promenade running along the waterfront can now be combined with some of these street ends to create park space. And we had showed you something like this at the last meeting, but I rendered it up to make sure everybody understood that what we're talking about here is a 42-inch rail type of arrangement, where this is a solid backing of the bulkhead. It's the backside of the bulkhead, but would be finished. And then our recommendation is that on top of that would be some type of a rail, probably a tube type of rail, so that this would be 42 inches from here to here, and allow us enough room that then we could do some lighting and benches and bollards and possibly trees along this side, and still have enough room to have a nice walkway down the middle.
Is the 42 inch, is that on the base side?
No, that's on, it's railing height, which is, about here.
Okay.
So the recommendation, what was it, John? What was the height of the new bulkhead?
Area
10. Right, and right now the street's at about 6.5, so it would be up.
All right, so the promenade is going to go over the top of the bulkhead?
No.
No?
The bulkhead will be out here as a freestanding structure. Kind of like it is, when you get to the street ends, some of the street ends have the bulkhead. You can see both sides of the bulkhead, one side from the street and one side from the beach.
Right.
That's what it'll be, only on this side of the bulkhead, it'll drop down into the water. Whereas on this side, you'll have the cars parked back here.
Parallel. Cars are parallel to the promenade, or they step
No,
down?
perpendicular.
They step down to the parking, or no?
Yeah, well, those are the particulars that we really have to think about, is because when we talk about doing this, the idea on all this is that it's ADA accessible. The idea on this is that it's all ADA accessible, so we need to figure out what's the grade here, what's the grade there, how high can we go up to get to here in order to establish this as a 42. It may end up being that this backside of the promenade might be actually a 2-foot, backside on the wall there. It might be, the promenade may actually end up being about 2 feet above.
What would the
existing
material
parking.
be of the bulkhead?
Excuse me?
What would the material be of the bulkhead?
That's open.
Yeah, I mean,
Most-
it would really depend on the funding source and the life expectancy that you're trying to achieve with a bulkhead at that location. I mean, ideally, a bulkhead there would probably be sheet steel, but, it could also be done in timber and vinyl sheeting as well. It would be a budget, probably would be a top of doing, trying to budget that project.
It's not feasible to even consider concrete, right?
A concrete bulkhead seawall could be built there, but, you know, you're talking about 2 to 3 times the cost of a conventional style bulkhead. And I'm not sure what it gets you. It might get you a little bit more life as far as how long it'll be there into the future, but it's not really going to get you anything additional with regard to function and working with the promenade. That concrete structure is going to want to be so wide in order to make it work appropriately or build it appropriately that it's going to actually hurt you with regard to your upland. So a steel sheet bulkhead or a vinyl sheet bulkhead allows you to push that sheet out as far as the DEP will let you and gain that area on the upland for, you know, for use and enjoyment, where that concrete seawall is going to need to be wider, it's going to eat into that.
Yeah, I hate to see them put back a wooden bulkhead because it's just going to rot out in 20 to 30 years.
I mean, the right answer could be a composite bulkhead, which is fiberglass sheet. Maybe it's steel piles with a fiber. You know, there's a lot of different options.
Okay.
But I would agree with you that timber would be the last option unless it was the only way you could get it built from a budget standpoint.
Thanks.
And the backside here is not really exposed to the water like it is on the other side. So, I mean, realistically, this part could be a more decorative treatment. We could figure out something to make it look a little nicer.
John, when we do a bulkhead that's over the water, isn't it all vinyl clad wood now?
I'm sorry?
It's all vinyl clad wood over the water now?
The existing bulkhead?
No, not existing, if we had to do it, which increases the cost with the wood.
If we were going to build a new bulkhead in that location with timber and vinyl material, it would all have to be inert material. It would have to be non-polluting.
Right.
So any of the timber members
Right.
would have to either be a natural hardwood, like
Ipe
or a green heart, or they would have to be coated with either fiberglass or vinyl or some other material that classifies them as inert.
As expensive.
So it does get expensive. Yeah.
That's what
Ideally, this is going
Jim's-
to be a composite sheet or a steel sheet type of application.
And what's the distance from the bottom of the promenade going up to that? Is that 4 foot or is that 2 foot?
42 inches.
42 inches, okay.
Which is, well, that comes from Boca Code. That's a railing height. So we're making it so that, and that's what I tried to represent here. You can see where a kid's standing there, he can't get over it, fall over it. Okay. So and then we're referencing this and we're calling it special situations. You have a couple situations out there where private properties kind of encroach or are into the right-of-way, both down at Washington and down at Coolidge. So the idea here is this is, you know, as everyone knows, this is Washington here. This is private property. So there's only 2 ways that it could be handled. One would be request an easement to run the promenade straight up, you know, continue that line straight up. That becomes a question of, you know, with the new bulkhead height, how does that impact these existing structures? These existing structures either have to come up or get moved or, you know, move forward. The other option is that we come down the promenade. The idea here was always, and always has been, how do we connect the park at the end of Washington to the promenade and make this all kind of one big area. So the other option would be that we take the walkway and run it behind the cars here and then turn it back in and connect to the promenade at that point, which I believe is, which one's that? Adams? The second one down? So we addressed it, but it is a situation, it's a special situation, that's for sure. What we had talked about is, you know, as part of the promenade is setting up some type of beams, both with the lighting, and we had showed you this in nautical bollards, you know, back on the back side of the promenade. We were looking at something like these bollards that can be lit up, so at nighttime the whole promenade has a nice lit, safe feel to it. And then bringing these lights, and then I put these in because I wanted to see how it works on the other side of the street. So now these pedestrian lights, same fixtures that are out on the promenade, can be put back on the business side, on the restaurant side.
Can I go back a minute to, well, you don't have to go back on that. At the height that you anticipate the promenade to be with 42 inches under the bulkhead, is that higher than the doorways to those businesses?
Is the promenade higher than the doorways of the business?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So how would you go in front of them again? I missed, did I?
Oh, okay. This slide.
Yeah.
One or two things,
I thought you were talking about the end. Yeah, the answer to your question is yes.
Yes.
You can explain. Got it.
that's why we had showed this, because one or two things has to happen there. The existing buildings are, what, like 9 or 10, or not even, 7, 8? The new bulkhead is going to be, as you just said, the new bulkhead is going to be higher than the existing doorways to the building, so the buildings are either going to have to be lifted up or moved forward, backward, something.
Yeah, the reality of it is, without, again,
Is that part of our project, or is that up to the building owners? Is that part of this project, or would that be up to the building owners to do that themselves, or?
it would be up to the building owners. The issue we have there is, in order to have a continuous bulkhead at the elevation that we would recommend, those buildings would have to be elevated. How, based on that, how that's done is
Even without a promenade?
even without a promenade.
Okay.
So then once that's done, now you've got some space to do some different things than what's out there.
Okay.
If nothing is done with those buildings, frankly, the only option would be to leave it as it is, where people kind of walk through on those properties now, or if you, and I haven't had a photo, if you want to take the conversation further, but if you look at, if you go down a little further to the Washington Avenue Street and the park area, you'll see that, it's a grass landscape area, and then they've got a public sidewalk, opposite the landscape area. You could extend that public sidewalk right along Amherst Avenue, and but the issue is it would run behind all of the private parking spaces that the properties have. So what it does is it creates a public walkway, and then you can tie back to the promenade, and at least it's a discernible walkway in the public right of way, and everybody can see it, and hopefully motorists pay attention to it because it's a built sidewalk. But it would also still be an apron to all those parking spaces. So you pull across that sidewalk and park, now you have people walking behind you potentially. So, but as it currently stands, that's really the city's only option because they don't control those properties right now.
Or the bulkheads in front of those properties?
Or the bulkhead, they're all practically on the land there as far as I know.
So if the city raises the bulkheads, they have the option of just not raising the bulkheads in front of those properties?
That's correct.
Which properties are we talking about specifically?
Let me just, Jay, if I can just, I go to the area.
Captain Andy's be the only one.
Captain Andy's.
Because the only one.
So you see here Washington Avenue, you see the park. What we're talking about here is the properties along here, starting, going from Tomatoes to the condos. You have Captain Andy's, you've got Junior's, all those buildings right in that area are an area that become a design challenge because we have, once you get past that area, you then go for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks down to Coolidge Avenue, where you've got the ability to get basically a seamless promenade until you get to Lamberti's. So the issue is, how do you deal with a safe pedestrian passage? That's what we were just talking about in this area of those existing buildings. You can see here Washington Avenue. You see that white line that I'm
right.
That's the existing public sidewalk, and you see where it sits. If you were just to extend that right along the front of those properties, it wouldn't take away their parking, but it would also be a shared situation between a pedestrian path and an apron for those parking spaces. It's a trade-off. Right now, there really is no way to walk through there. So you basically, what you do is you get to the first building. You can walk in front of, I guess that one's Captain Andy's, right? You can walk in front of Captain Andy's, but at that point, you're kind of just either meandering through the existing improvements, or you're pushed out into the street or across the street. So it's a decision that the city would have to make if they go forward with this project. Do they want to create a linkage that's better than what exists? they want to talk to those property owners to try to work in concert with them. It's a design, it's a real design issue that has to be thought out much further.
John, quick question. I'm sorry, Roger. Did you take into consideration possibly elevating across the parking or promenade through that space by just obtaining air right easement?
You're saying elevating a walkway?
Right. Instead of behind or in front, if you went over.
Over top of the parking?
Which is only what?
Well, I mean, that's a possibility. I think from an aesthetic standpoint and a cost standpoint, I think it will be a real challenge to try to get that. Get it. I'm sorry? Right, and to create a barrier-free access. It would be, I think it would be, it's an interesting idea, but I think it would be a really difficult challenge to try to create something. I think ideally what would happen here is if and when these buildings got elevated or renovated, they'd be excuse me, they'd be higher. If the city could obtain some level of access easement through there, you could potentially just continue your promenade right through there.
Another way of looking at it is the fact that you have to understand all of those properties are owned by one owner. And at this point in time, and that he is, we know, and it's well known, negotiating with individuals to buy all of them, with development groups to buy them all. The development groups that I've had a contact with a couple of them are interested in buying all of those properties and doing something in the way of a unified commercial recreational development. They're all aware of this study taking place. They're all aware of this promenade proposal, and they're all, I think, will be very interested in working with the city in tying in whatever private development they do there with the public development. At the other end of Amherst Avenue, we all know that Lamberti's will soon be coming in with a proposal, I think, to demolish the building and rebuild completely. And as part of that, the entire matter of the relationship between Lamberti's and the city will be taken up, because the restaurant is on a piece of land owned completely by the city under a long-term lease, which allows for, as part of, this planning board will deal with the development, but the city will deal with the extension of that lease. And there can possibly be design relationship between this promenade and whatever Lamberti comes up with at that end. So you have two unified commercial developments, one at each end, that I think both parties will be willing to work with the city, and the timing is right. They're both interested in this study.
Could it be done piecemeal like that, or would it have to be all done at the same time?
The improvements could be done in phases, certainly. Yeah, as long as they're planned out, so that our elevations and grades and things can work with the neighbors. Yeah, they could definitely be phased. Absolutely.
Do we know the elevation of Junior's?
Of Junior's floor?
Yeah.
That was pretty high.
Yeah. I think Captain Andy's would probably be the only one that was still low.
Is obviously
Yeah. But I think the city owns more of the parking spaces than...
Captain Andy's and what we used to call Integrity Marina, they're on the ground.
Yeah.
They're both on the ground. The Junior's restaurant and the Junior's Donut are about 4 steps up,
At least.
I think.
Maybe more.
More than that?
It is only 4 steps up, though. It seems high, but it's not high enough.
No, I don't think it is.
That would put it at roughly, let's say 3 feet above the ground. That only puts it at about 9. And in that area, we have to be as well.
I get a lot of donuts. I don't think it's much more than
That's true. If you bring this building up in compliance, you're going to have some pretty interesting ways to be able to create this complex.
Yeah.
Could be delighted to tie it in.
Why, excuse,
The deck or 2 years is approximate elevation 8, so that gives you an idea.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
what, if Junior's is only at 8, is it, see, this is what I'm not getting. How high is the promenade going to be?
The flat part of the promenade?
The walking part of the
The walking part of the promenade would, if John's saying 10, right, for the top of
It's
the
going to be approximately elevation 6.5.
6.5.
6.5. Okay.
And that gives us, to make up that back to the street, we're going to have to kind of ramp things and,
So it's about 18 inches.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have exactly that. We'll have about an 18-inch where we talked about on the back side of where the cars are now.
Right.
There'll be an 18-inch wall.
When you
to the
talked
promenade.
about raising the pitch of this road too to make it less.
Yeah, that was the other option we had talked about.
It's a design consideration that drives the cost of a project up, but that is an option.
So
We
it
could
would,
slant those parking spaces so that there's not as high a wall at the end, because we all know that that water drains down to that concrete gutter strip that's running back behind them.
so it would be higher than what Junior's is now elevated to? Is that what you're saying?
no.
No?
No.
Okay, that's where I'm going. The bulkhead, okay. Okay, I got it.
Okay, this
I
kind
got
of tells the story of the improvements to the promenade. So that would be the bulkhead.
Right.
Okay? The bulkhead that's there now, as you know, is, it's a foot or so above the existing sidewalk, something like
Right.
that, and it's got that railing on top of it. So this piece would go 2 feet roughly outside of that, all right? That would get cut down below grade, the existing bulkhead. And then this walkway would be built 42 inches below the top elevation of that new bulkhead. Our recommendation for that bulkhead is elevation 10. So it puts us in the range of 6.5.
Right.
That's about 18 inches, a foot, depending on where you are, a foot to 18 inches higher than where the existing sidewalk is.
Okay.
This is not an elevated
Right.
promenade. This is
Okay.
this is a promenade essentially near or close to existing grade. But what we're able to do is make it considerably wider because of some of the design changes to the street cross section. By moving parking spaces away from it, picking up the area by moving the bulkhead out. So right now we have a very narrow area. We're going to nearly double that width
Right.
without losing any parking or circulation.
So it's going to keep people on the left from walking off the promenade and falling, dropping 18 inches into the street.
We had talked about the number of items, whether it's putting benches, putting bollards with benches, putting bollards with benches with lights, or to the point of having a curb, a fence, a low fence, a 3-foot-high fence on that backside.
Yeah, I mean, your two options would be to put up some fall protection, like a rail or something on that side, or there is room, there is space to be able to modify that parking elevation, so you just have a standard 6-inch curb drop there or so, and bring that parking up a little bit. There's some room within the crown of Amherst Avenue and the way that those parking spaces are sloped. You could bring all that up enough to make it work without having to have fall protection on the back side of that walkway.
Right.
I like the car protection with the 18-inch.
I'm sorry?
How many cars do we have in the bay back there last year, Jim? The woman that drove through the fence, and then the other one was hanging halfway.
There's only one last year.
Just one last year? There's been about 3 that I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you won't, that'll create a natural barrier. Because the other thing that we had talked about, and you could see, I tried to sketch out where the cars are, you can see they're down lower behind there, because the other thing we had talked about is people come to bring stuff to their boats and want to be able to offload it and they will be able to, if you had the back of a pickup truck, offload your stuff onto the promenade and then go around and get up on the promenade and go to your boat. So it could work out very nicely, actually. It might be at the height of a tailgate.
John, you permitted, but boardwalk type rail?
What do you mean by a boardwalk? Like, you mean just like a 3-rail
Yeah, just like you have on the ocean.
here?
No, on the...
Oh, on the backside?
On the backside.
I don't, yeah.
Tom, you want to limit, you don't want a complete rail because people are going to their boats to the different
Yeah.
marinas. You don't want to obstruct what people are used to doing by having a complete railing there, do you? I mean,
You have to have many openings throughout that opening.
Yeah, it could be designed so that in the spaces, you have the bench here, so you don't need a railing behind there, but maybe between the other side of that bench and the next bench, maybe there's a railing, or maybe there's an opening and a railing. So, but the 18 inches in itself does not dictate that you have to have a railing. It's 30 inches drop before you are required by BOCA to have a railing. So nothing says you have to have a railing. What?
But they have reach on one side.
Pardon me, Clive?
Right.
Sorry.
If you have more than one step, you got a falling hazard, you got to protect it.
But it's not a step. It's just an elevation change.
Going to have lawsuits daily.
But those are design issues that need to be dealt with much further down the road than where we are on this. We're proposing the options that, we believe that these options all can work. And, we wouldn't propose something that we didn't think could be built. But you may be right that, we need to have a fence on the backside or whatever. But we did try to take into account the boaters and their access to the water. Oh, yeah, we were at the street furniture, and then I'll show you this one to show how the lights come on the other side. The other thing we had talked about is doing something at the end of Washington to establish this zone. We had talked about one option, doing a gateway over the road maybe, so that it signals that you've reached that area. The other option is some type of a structure, something that could be lit, something, so here again, that's just ideas. The idea is that we wanted it to be able to be seen both when you're coming south on Amherst and when you're coming directly down Washington. So the idea on something like this was it was going to kind of reach out so that when you're coming south on Amherst, you would see it, or if you're coming west on Washington, you would see it. The other thing that we were kind of tasked with looking at was this situation, which is what happens when the bulkhead, and this is at Washington at the beach, what happens when the bulkhead, which is here now, gets lifted up to here? And what can you do with that grade change? Right now, the city's choice has been to have those walkthroughs, which works in most situations, but when we get to Washington, I'm not sure you have the room for that. So what could you do? Well, right now you have this whole piece of sidewalk which basically goes nowhere. So the concept here was to have ADA accessible ramp that could go up to some kind of an overlook and then come down on the other side of the beach. So some way to treat it aesthetically. The other one that we had talked about is Runson. I'm sorry. Where right now all the water drains down and goes through a couple weep holes down here in the bulkhead. So the idea here was to take and do an ADA accessible ramp that goes up and maybe take out some of this asphalt down here at the end and do something with some grasses or do something so that when you come to where this photo is taken, instead of looking at what looks like prison walls around the whole thing, we could do something with do something with planted vegetation that would get watered by the runoff that comes down the street, and then do something nice with an overlook type of thing. All right. Any other question?
All right, so we're going to wrap up with the ordinance recommendations, which was really the majority of the board's comments. And I'm going to go through them. We have reviewed all the comments that all the board members have had. And some of the specific items are going to require some discussion among the board members because some members had some different ideas about a few of the different recommendations. So I'll go through them, and hopefully we could come to a consensus with regard to each one, and then potentially move these items forward. the first section that we looked at, and I'm going right from the package that we had originally provided to you with regard to the ordinance recommendations. The first section that we looked at was 175-26D, landscaping. And the topic of discussion was landscaping in the front yards and the beach blocks. And we had made a recommendation that your current ordinance allows for the option of trees to be in the front yard, and we had made a recommendation that that be eliminated and that trees be prohibited from the front yard in the beach block. There's been, as I'm sure you know, there's been, and we've been part of some of those applications, there's been a number of disputes between neighbors over the years with regard to view blockage and things like that in that beach block. And you could still create a very beautiful landscape on the beach block without having trees. One of the specific questions Mr. Wozleski brought up was that if we're going to go down that path, we need to identify definitions of what's a tree, what's a shrub. That's a difficult thing to do. And my further thought after reviewing your comments was that it could be done by maximum height, so you're not limiting to a tree, what the species is, or whether it's a tree or whether it's a shrub, so that you don't have to go out there and determine what they planted and how it's classified, but a maximum height. And our recommendation would be a maximum height of 8 feet. If you're standing on your front porch, your head is still going to be higher than 8 feet, especially given the current standards. That's an item that would be open for discussion with the board. But we do think it's something that could help deal with issues that you've had in the past on a number of different circumstances.
Are you recommending a maximum height of 8 feet at planting, or a maximum height where what your plant can never exceed 8 feet?
Planted and maintained at 8 feet.
Planted and maintained at 8 feet?
Yes. It would be above curb, yes.
So that's an enforcement issue.
It would become an enforcement issue. I thought you would enjoy that, Mr. Galantino.
Clem, that's what you're asking. I mean, that's the problem. How it does require enforcement. We have to have a plant warden.
I actually wrote that in, and I thought that it should be no more than 8 foot. Exactly what he said. I think that's the right, no more than that. I agree.
As opposed to just no trees in the front yard?
Yeah, because what's the difference if it's a tree, a bush, or whatever?
Right.
If it's lower than something, you see over it.
I just find, having lived on the beach block a good portion of my life, that street trees do not grow well there, and the one type that does is a cypress tree that
Grows too well.
it grows too well. It roots everywhere. I think we should follow what your recommendation is, and no trees in the Governor Strip. My parents have cherry trees in the backyard, they have pine trees around the house, but to put something...
We already have no trees in the Governor Strip. We're talking about front yards.
In the front?
Within the front setback, from the
Yeah.
curb to the front setback, planting and maintaining plant materials no higher than 8 feet.
What are you going to do with Carol Hoffman?
The only problem with that is existing stuff. The biggest problem, if there were no beach blocks and everything was new housing,
right,
we could do that. But there are existing tree stands and so forth that are much higher that we can't retroactively make them cut down to 8 feet. You have a problem with enforcement? You're shaking your head.
Because it's another book of stone. I mean, we're
Right,
going around
that's
taking
right.
photos. Every
Yeah.
Margate property had stone.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now we're going to go around, take photos of all the properties in Margate that have trees.
Yeah. The only way to enforce it is to inventory all shrubbery on all beach blocks that currently exceed 8 feet.
Well, why don't we just leave it and get rid of trees, no more trees in the front yard for the new properties? You're not taking them out for people that already have them. And live with the consequences. It's better than what we have now. There's no height restriction. It's only people complaining about
Say that again, Rich.
Leave it like you said, no trees in the front yard. You know, some bushes might be high, some bushes might be low, but you have no trees there. It's better than what you have now.
So we would,
And then there's no enforcement problem.
But then you have to define a bush and a tree.
we have to define what a tree is.
You got to go with the height limit. You can't just say, I mean, is a...
Well, you're opening up a whole can of worms by going with a height limit.
Well, if you say no tree, then what's a tree? That's Clem's original problem.
Well, he's an architect, not an
Defining a
arborist.
tree.
The tree is, I'll show you what a tree is. I think we're creating problems that don't exist.
Rich, just so you
I
know
agree.
too, if, as far as like inventorying properties in Margate, the assessor's office already takes pictures of every property. Before they're torn down, after they're as-built, they have Mary and Jim have a complete dossier of every house.
But that means comparing what you have to their pictures online.
I can say from our standpoint, I don't object to leaving it alone. I think that we've been involved in cases where, you know, neighbors are suing each other and every other thing over view blockages, and so our thought was to try to create a situation that tries to eliminate or at least reduce that. But it does bring up a host of other issues. How do you police it? How do you deal with what's already existing?
Well, how do we police no trees in the Governor's Strip now? We don't let them plant trees in the Governor's Strip.
Right, but you don't let them plant anything in the Governor's Strip, so that's pretty easy to go walk out to the Governor's Strip. If something's planted there, take it out. But, you know, a cypress, for example, when it's planted at this height, it looks like a shrub or a bush. And then next thing you know, it's 30 feet high.
That's a,
and I think that was the concern.
Sprouting everywhere.
So I don't object, we don't object from our perspective.
so if you leave it alone now, they can put trees, shrubs, Leland cypress, anything in the front yard.
Correct.
So
That's the
then
way-
why not just say tree, and if an occasional problem comes up, it's better than trying to regulate the 8-foot thing. I don't think it's,
Roger, can I ask you a question? Sure. Is it possible to, like you've done in the past, to say no trees and to actually have a approved list of shrubs? So that in a beach block, you're limited to 50 varieties, whatever.
Well, why would you want to...
Well, that way we can specify varieties that won't overgrow, that won't have roots.
is a Leland cypress considered a shrub?
I think it's considered a tree.
Right.
There must be a technical definition. Some
Jesus Christ.
publication.
Maybe we shouldn't have started with this.
I don't ever agree. It helps. What you're saying helps. Let it help. Have no trees.
No tree. I think that's the simplest way. No trees, and you define the area. The area I think you want is from the curb to the required front
Front yard,
setback.
yeah. If a person has their house set way back and wants to plant a nice tree against their house, then
Or
there's
the backyard, the three
Yeah.
sides they can plant trees on.
Here's the Google, the difference between a shrub and a tree. A shrub is a small to medium-sized woody plant. It is distinguished from a tree by its multiple stems and shorter height, usually under 6 meters tall.
6 feet or meters?
6 meters is almost 20 feet.
Right, that's 20 feet. I'm saying it's a difference between a shrub and a tree.
Right.
But people can plant shrubs now anyway. Let them plant shrubs. Just
Right.
say you can't plant trees there. It just helps the problem.
We're fine with that. That was our original recommendation.
I'm going to really throw a monkey wrench into it.
Does anybody have a problem with going with the original?
Since we built the bulkhead so high, and the dunes are going to be higher, there won't be any need to worry about
That's right.
any
Nobody will
trees.
care about their view anymore, right?
Beach block right, the existing units should be the planting of new trees within the front yard.
I think you got to reference some viable description of a tree. And it's got to be out there, not the Google thing, a technical.
All right, I'm going to ask for a quick vote here of, does this have to be a motion or a vote? Doesn't have to be a motion, right? Just be a vote. I just want to ask for a yes or no vote here. Do we want, the question is, do we want to accept his recommendation as is, or make it as is with a definition of a tree or shrub. All in favor of as is, say aye. Aye. All.
Tell them to raise their hand.
The second part of it is if you want to have written definitions of what a shrub is. All in favor of that?
On a tree.
Well, you got to vote one way or the other, guys. Oh, I already said both versions, then we voted.
Tell them to raise their hands.
Raise your hands if you want to accept it as is.
1, 2, 3, 4.
As they propose.
6.
The recommendation is for no trees. You want it
The
that?
recommendation is for no trees.
No trees, period.
Within the front setback.
Within the front setback of the beach block.
I think you have too many people.
All raise your hands for yes.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6. Raise your hands for no. 1, 2. Okay.
All right, so that stays.
So we'll leave it stay as it is.
Okay, moving on. The next section that we looked at,
Excuse me, I'm only doing this because if we do this, then we can make a recommendation tonight. Screw the game.
What game?
the next section we looked at was 175-26E, and it deals with fences or walls. There were two items that we talked about. The only one that had any comment associated with it was with regard to the trellises, and the question that a couple
Is a trellis a pergola? Is that what you're saying a trellis is?
Well, we look at, you're saying it's not the same thing?
No, trellises are against the wall. Pergola is freestanding.
I think this was intended to address both trellises and pergolas, was it not, Roger?
Did you skip fences or walls?
That's what he's on right now.
Nobody had comment about that one.
Oh, that one's okay? All right.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go through the ones that nobody...
Oh, okay. Go
Unless you want me to.
No.
John,
Yes.
in my experience through the hardware store with materials sold, they count trellises as freestanding ones too. The manufacturers, the suppliers, the specs. I'm just telling you what today they do. If you go on and...
That's the way it's been.
It is. It's not just against the wall.
I think very easily we can just say trellis and/or pergola, so it covers both.
Okay.
And our intention was, the original ordinance said, it didn't specify a length, it said you could have a maximum of 2. Our intention was that you could still have a maximum of 2, but the overall length, when you add them all together, can't be greater than 16 feet. So you're not taking over your backyard with trellises, or pergolas. I would suggest that we change it to say the recommendation of this study is to limit the total length of all trellises and pergolas to 16 feet, with a maximum of 2 trellises or pergolas permitted per lot.
I agree.
So it would have to be...
So you could do 2 8x8s, you could do an 8x10 and an 8x6.
Okay, you can't do 2 8x10s, which is what is allowed now.
Because that
would be
20 feet long.
16 by 20, right. So you're cutting what's allowed down by 2 feet, or 4 feet.
The trellises are only allowed to be 8 feet.
Trellises are a maximum of 8
trellis
feet
is.
right now.
I'm sorry.
No.
If you have a trellis against the side of your house where roses are growing up, it can only be 16 feet long?
That's the way your current...
That's what the ordinance says, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Raj, didn't you just approve one on Bay Shore Drive
It's
West
8 with a
with the
maximum of 2,
louvers?
so you could do
Would
up
you
to
call that a
16 right
pergola?
now.
Which one?
Bay Shore Drive West, the one that you counted that as ground coverage, that had a roof on top.
I can't picture it.
Yep.
I don't know, I didn't measure it.
Couldn't we say roof structure? What would that be? Roof structure freestanding.
Wouldn't that be a pavilion? If you put a roof on it? Jim? Wouldn't that be a pavilion if you put a roof on it?
No, a pergola, the way I see it, does not have a roof. It has a top, but it's an open top. That's not the same as a roof.
But they make them louvered. They go automatically open and close.
We'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, we allow 2 8-foot pergolas.
8 by 10.
No, 8 by 8. 8 by, the way I read the ordinance, it's 8 by 8 by, it's 8 in any direction.
Square, 8-foot square?
Yeah, it could
Oh,
be,
okay.
yeah.
Oh.
Or you can make it 8 by 2 if you want that size, but the maximum would be a footprint of 8 by 8 and 8 feet high. And you could have 2 of those.
Correct.
That's okay. I mean, I think that's fine. Give people some flexibility for design of their garden. Yours are larger?
I agree with Rod.
Are you agreeing with what he's saying here? Or you're saying leave it like it is?
With what he changed it. The total length, 16 feet, maximum of 2 trellises.
Okay.
That was your change. I think that,
So 16 by 8 would be the maximum size if they were put together?
6, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, move on. What? No.
Suppose I don't have to take mine down.
No, your grandfather.
We're not mentioning our own houses, Clem. Don't put that on the record.
Next.
All right, next, the next section was 175-29 zoning districts. I think Joe mentioned...
Where are we?
29B?
175-29?
Got it.
Yeah, I didn't skip something, did I? No. 175-29B, establishment of zones. There was a request to take or give our recommendations whether or not additional zones may be in the best interest of the city. Joe, I think, made a comment about that.
No.
It wasn't Joe? Somebody made a comment about it with regard to that it may be a good idea to establish additional zones. Our opinion kind of still stands that I don't think that Margate needs more zones with regard to their zoning districts. You are getting ready to do a master plan reevaluation. That's something that if you really want them to take a hard look at it, that would be the appropriate time to do it. The next section we looked at was 175-30B, which is dealing with yard regulations. There was a comment made. Give me 1 second.
Should continue to review and approve case by case. My reason is that every property.
I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. What I said was, we should continue to review and approve case by case. My reason is every property design will be different and can impact the surrounding properties.
So your comment for that was on C, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we're one right before that still.
So was there a comment on this, A?
The comment, Rich had a comment on that one with regard to, doesn't CAFRA dictate that anyway? They do have a minimum setback requirement, but based on your existing conditions, there's ways to reduce that within the DEP rules.
Okay.
So it doesn't really hard and fast govern it.
Okay.
So we would like to stay with our recommendation there.
Yeah, I wasn't saying change it. I had a
Okay.
question. Doesn't CAFRA do that? Okay.
But they do have their own standards. You're correct about that.
And that's exactly the way I've been interpreting it for 14 years, so I'm glad to have clarification.
Do they still have the shadow in the DEP regulations for CAFR? If it's in the shadow of the structure?
As far as being able to expand your building?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still some permits by rule available for that, yes. The next section is, Joe had a comment about, or actually a couple of folks did. Clem did as well. Projections and encroachments. It's the discussion about stairs. As you know, exterior stairs right now are not permitted. We had recommended that so long as the stairs were on the water side, that they'd be permitted to go from the first level to the second level, second to the third, if there is a third level. Some of the concerns were, let's leave it as is and deal with it on a case-by-case basis, because if you permit it, suddenly you're going to have ugly staircases. But if you have the control over it, they're going to have to create a nice architectural design. You still have the opportunity to see it and improve it. And then another comment was that consideration should be given to only allowing stairs from the first to the second level, but not above the second level.
Okay. All right.
As far as our recommendations based on those concerns, the reason that we looked at this is because it brings a lot of applications to the board, because it's become the norm, on the beachfront and the bayfront, that people want those outdoor stairs. It's a board call. If you wish to maintain control over it, you certainly would have that right to do that and not make a change here. But you know better than I how many applications come forward now with exterior stairs.
Most of the applications they're cooking on one floor and want to take it down outside and not tromp through the house and everything.
Correct.
So if we make it just first floor to second floor, then if anybody wanted to the third floor, they come before the board, that would get rid of 90% of them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it would, and I think that's actually a good suggestion. I don't know if everyone's comfortable with that.
You're only talking on water side of bay and
Yes.
ocean?
Yes.
Nothing in between?
Yeah, just water side.
Okay, but are you talking ground to first floor porch to second floor porch, or first floor porch to second floor porch only? In some case, how about from the ground?
Ground to first floor porch, like if you had your deck in your backyard, I mean, you're permitted to do that now.
How about ground spiral directly up to second floor porch if there is no... Well,
No, you're right, you do run into this stuff. So how about no exterior,
But they come up now.
no exterior stairs above the second floor, and don't define the lower end?
Let's not, make it, let's keep it clear. Anything from the ground or the first floor porch to the second floor, but not to the third floor.
Okay.
Water side only. Everybody okay?
Is everybody okay with that?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Jim?
Okay, moving on.
Did you make that note, John?
Yeah, I'll remember that. The next section we looked at was with regard to accessory structures and uses, but actually nobody had any comment on that, so we'll move past that. The next section, 175-33D, which is where most folks had comments.
Where? B?
D.
It's with regard to decks and patios.
Okay.
Roger brought up the topic, or brought up a couple points with regard to, under item 3, items A and B, that they need to be identified for non-bay front lots.
Correct.
And then there was a comment made, and I think it was a result of the original conversation with regard to deck heights, that deck heights shouldn't be permitted to come all the way to the finished floor. They should be required to be stepped down 4 inches. Which we don't have objection to. So the item D would change to read plus 1 foot 8 inches of freeboard. So that would force that deck to be at least 4 inches below the finished floor of that building.
Which item are you on, John?
I'm on number 3, item D.
D as in David, okay. The bayfront property has your decks and patios located in the rear yard.
And then on item E, we had a typo in there, and that one should read, at the minimum base flood elevation plus 2 feet 8 inches of freeboard.
2 feet, changed to 2 feet 8 inches?
Correct.
And why is that?
And again, it forces you to be 4 inches below the finished floor requirement.
It's up to that level, right?
Up to that, yeah, you can be lower.
Right,
yes.
right, up to that level.
Correct. But it doesn't allow you to be at the finished floor. It forces you to be 4 inches below the finished floor.
And we're using the BFEs, not the higher up. We're using the lower of, right? It's the BFE.
We're referencing the preliminary firms, which is not the ABFEs. Correct.
Okay.
So if it's an ABFE, then it's going to be 1 foot and 4 inches.
Correct. That was the concern, is that you
Yes.
didn't, in this interim time, if you had a circumstance
Right.
where you were allowed to or required to use the ABFE.
I just want to make sure you change that.
You didn't want the deck to come higher. So,
Right.
no, we're referencing the preliminary firm.
Okay, good.
There were a number of comments about F and G, which dealing with bituminous concrete patios and concrete patios being prohibited, and then that no impervious surfaces be permitted beneath decks. This is a judgment call by the board. I mean, concrete patios are permitted in every other town I work in, to be honest with you. So, if you want to change it, we could certainly do that. I don't have a positive or negative comment to make about those two topics. I do think that under item G, that the idea of a deck is that it does help promote some infiltration. So if you're going to build a deck, you're allowed to have a pretty large surface area of a deck. It should be pervious beneath the deck, because you want to...
But John, the problem we're getting into now is sustainability and watershed management.
Okay.
So if Margate's pushing more on the sustainable, all the towns are. How do you maintain your water that comes into your island where it's gone, the rain, has to go back in the earth.
Right.
So they don't want it to go back in the street. So if you can make it so you have a good perk on the soil, then that would be an added asset.
Correct, and that's why I'm saying under item G, I believe that it should stay as written. But under item F, I mean, you do permit a paver patio, which is essentially just as impervious as a concrete patio, I mean, the way that they're built.
Why would it be just as impervious? If it's set in sand and you have the cracks between the pavers, the water drains between...
But your ordinance allows you to set a paver patio. I mean, if you watch a paver patio be constructed by...
Not in concrete.
But whether it's in concrete or not,
The water runs off.
It's so minimally porous, the water runs off it just like it's a concrete patio.
I beg to differ. This happened in my own backyard. We had a concreted-in flagstone patio, pooled up. We got rid of it. We put in AP Henry pavers set in sand. We never have it ponding at all now. In addition to which, this entire ordinance was sent to FEMA as part of our CRS. They've seen it. It's become part of our rating now, and I wouldn't want to go backwards on that.
That's fine. That's fine.
There is some permeability by a paver patio. I would object.
It depends on the installation, but...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right, absolutely.
If it's not right, it's...
Most of your patio blocks that they put down now, they dig down and put such a heavy base of stone for stability on the sand. It's not really pervious. It isn't. I mean, you can get some that are, but...
I don't think we can take a chance with our CRS rate to get rid of this now. We get a few complaints, but most people go along.
Well, the question here is to accept F as it is, right?
I'm recommending that we accept G as it is. What we were talking about here is F, and I certainly would not recommend that you allow bituminous concrete patios, first of all, for
My
aesthetics.
question is, are you talking about walking out your back door, down 3 steps, you're now going to have to put some pervious bricks in or stone? Rather than just a little concrete pad?
That's the way it's been.
That's the ordinance now.
No, we're not talking about a landing at the bottom of steps. We're talking about patios.
And what is the difference between a large landing and a patio?
What's the difference between a tree and a patio?
Exactly.
I'll figure that out. A landing is just 3 by 4.
I mean,
a patio is bigger.
A personal feeling is you have a backyard. Okay, some of us have backyards in Margate, not all of you, but if you have dogs, you want them to walk on the concrete before they come in the house to get the dirt off their paws. You need something as a buffer.
Put pavers down.
They walk on the pavers. What's the difference?
There's grass growing up in between those cracks.
Not if you put concrete on them.
No concrete. Jim, do you have something to say about... Well, then say it again so I hear it, because I haven't heard it.
It says repeated ratings.
Does it matter, do you think it will matter in our ratings if we go back on what we've done on that?
We're moving forward, and somebody's going to design a watershed management plan. Watershed management plan is a plan that allows a homeowner, all the water that comes in on rain has to go back on that property, into the ground.
So this would promote that.
Right.
So we want this.
Yes.
We'll leave it as is.
Yes. Move on.
That's
Yes.
fine.
Keep it. Okay.
Are you rolling out concrete pavers?
No.
No, we're rolling out concrete.
Solid concrete, impervious.
Oh, well, yeah, right. Well, then I think it should, the concrete patios can be either concrete pavers or poured concrete. I think it should be defined.
Well, it's defined right now.
We could add the language to say...
Pavers are allowed and concrete isn't now. I mean, it's not a
Most pavers are
choice.
made out of concrete.
I think in our ordinance for our coverage, it's pervious and impervious.
Yes.
We'll simply add to that statement which says bituminous concrete patios and monolithically poured concrete patios are prohibited. So if it's one solid slab of concrete, that's prohibited.
Good. That sounds good. Good.
Okay.
G is perfect.
Next section is, that there were comments on, is 175, 33D5, swimming pools, hot tubs, and spas. There were a number of comments. We made a recommendation to go to no setback being required between a pool and a bulkhead, and your ordinance currently permits it that way. It does not have a restriction. That brought up a lot of discussion among, I would say, at least half the board members. Functionally, just so you understand that, we chose that because it always becomes a question of where do you measure the setback from on a bulkhead. You've got Z-sheet style bulkheads, you've got straight bulkheads, you've got caps over the bulkheads. Functionally, you will end up with a 2 to 3 foot space between the outer edge of the cap, and probably, actually at least a 2, more like a 3 foot space, and the edge of the pool water, because you have to be able to build your 1 foot thick wall of your pool. You've got a bulkhead, physical bulkhead structure that is a couple feet thick, and a cap that sits on top of that. So even if you have no setback, you're physically still going to have 2 to 3 feet of space there.
All right, now this is a dumb question from the chairman of the board. I thought you had to have 6 feet.
Not by the bulkhead, no.
On the ocean or the bay?
On the ocean, yes, not on the bay.
Not on the bay, okay.
The actual property line on the bay could be 100 feet out there.
Yeah, I know.
So our recommendation is still to leave it alone because you're still getting a 2 to 3 foot space.
Okay.
And it becomes very difficult from a code enforcement standpoint, to keep arguing where it gets measured from on a bulkhead.
I think that's what a lot of the comments were, though, was my impression that we're reducing it from 6 foot to nothing, and that's not the case. It's staying as it is.
You're actually leaving it the way that it is.
Okay.
But John, you're saying you're going to have space, but you're not going to have walkable egress space. You're just going to have distance from
You could if you chose
from
to.
the bay to the pool. You're only going to have a distance. You're not going to have an egress. What Desmond and I was looking at is, if you get out of the pool, you have to have a egress path between the bulkhead and the pool, so that you don't fall into one or fall into the other. There has to be, or if the emergency responders came and they had to get in there, you can't have them jumping up and down on bulkheads trying to get in. Right now, you're putting that smack up against the bulkhead, whether there's space or not. It's not egressable or usable space. And that's what we're talking about.
That's an existing condition, right? That's how it is right now.
That's how it is now, because we couldn't define where the back property line was. So, and what we're saying is, with so many new pools going in, somewhere along the line, there has to be a couple feet of egress between the bulkhead and the pool that can be used for safety or anything.
Okay, but I mean, you
First
have
responders or
presumably you would have space between the pool and the home to be able to get by the pool. And I mean, I'll give you a prime example of what you're talking about here. In my own home, I specifically built a fountain that runs into the pool on the back side of my pool, so that you can't get out over there, and my children can now not run circles around my pool. So I mean, and then there's infinity edge pools that don't want any space on the one side. I mean, there's many different pool designs that don't allow you to go all the way around them. I mean, I can tell you that this is something that you have approved dozens and dozens of these pools, because we're always dealing with how do we make the bulkhead structure work, because this pool is so tight to the bulkhead. They're all over your community now.
What if you have it above ground? Why can't you put it above ground against the bulkhead? What if the pool is above ground, not in the ground? You're all talking about your in-ground pools. What if it's above ground? Why can't the above ground go right against it? So, because now you can't get around the pool. You understand what I'm saying? They're usually 3 feet high. What are you going to do, climb up on top of the pool? I agree. Just because you need to get access around a pool doesn't mean you need to go have 2 feet around the perimeter. I understand you for safety, but he's right. You put a waterfall, you have an above ground against a fence, because you don't want to be able to get into the pool. It has to be guarded. You're not following me. You're looking at me. What's going on?
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand what you're
Jim,
saying.
I think anybody who puts a pool in on the bay above ground wasted $5 million. It's just not, it's not feasible. Nobody on the bay is going to put an above
That we
ground
should
pool.
just let the pool go to the thing? Yeah, I agree, Tim. Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
Tom?
Well, has this, wait a minute, I have a question. Has this, Jimmy or Roger or whatever, has this been a problem?
For safety.
No,
Has this
Not that I'm
been a
aware
problem?
of. We were asked to look at it because
The
there's no-
the existing condition we have now, rules, has that been a problem? Has that caused safety issues? Has it been a problem?
Not that I'm aware of. We were
Not
just,
that
we
I'm
were asked to
aware of.
review it to make it clear that there is no setback required, because right now the ordinance is silent on it. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been an issue. And it's more, on bayfront lots especially, it's more the norm.
Well, it's
than-
only bayfront lots this applies to.
Yeah, correct. But it's more the norm that they're up against the bulkhead.
Go ahead.
What John was saying is when you build the bulkhead, you still have a 2-foot cap on it. When you do the pool, you have a lip, which is about roughly around 12 inches, maybe 15.
So there's at least something to hold
So
on to
you-
if you're the kid at the
You've
side
got
of the
better
pool.
than
You can
3
hold on.
feet. If you build it up against the bulkhead, you still have 3 feet of walkway there. And you can't put any bushes there or anything, because they're going to fall in the water.
But it's not.
What if you have an
not level
infinity?
walkway, is it?
Is
Is it level?
Well, who cares?
Mike, what if you have an infinity edge where it just
All right,
drops right
wait a
off?
minute, hold it. Let me bring this to a stop now. Let me hear another yay and nay on this. And this is your actual vote, Joe. Who is in favor of, let's say aye, who's in favor of accepting what he has written? Raise your hand.
Give us a chance to read it.
You've read it. You had it for a month.
I didn't memorize
Against?
it.
No setback, right?
No setback. Passes. Okay, next issue.
As is?
What was the vote?
That was 5, 6, and the rest didn't, I didn't ask for those. I didn't count your vote.
I didn't really get the vote.
I didn't count your vote either.
All right, next section is fee schedule. Nobody had a comment on that, so we're going to move right past it.
Can we make it higher?
Can you make it higher? You can make it whatever you want to make it, but
Actually, that was discussed by the commissioners today, and that's exactly the figure they came up with.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So God bless.
okay, the next section is with regard to Schedule B1. It's a discussion on how you measure building coverage, landscape coverage, and setback for beachfront lots. And Roger asked for some clarification, and I'll summarize our intention of what the final language would be, and that would be if you are on the ocean front and your property line is outside your bulkhead, you would be able to calculate your landscape coverage and your setback from the bulkhead, but you would be able to calculate your building coverage from the property line. So what that does is it doesn't penalize you for the size of the house you can build because your property line happens to be oceanward of your bulkhead, but it does make you measure setback from the bulkhead, and it's still
And landscaping.
and landscaping, so that you don't, if you happen to have a bulkhead that's way inside your property line, if you let them measure all the way out to the property line, then
have no
you're
landscaping.
basically going to have a building in all concrete, and that's your property.
Any idea what the furthest out from the bulkhead is?
I think we have a couple that are 8, 10, 12.
Oh, really?
Maybe
All right.
one or two.
Yeah, the
even
biggest one I
15.
remember seeing was like 8 or 9, but there's probably some larger ones.
There is a situation where people are looking to purchase part of the beach area, and this will put the bulkhead at one point, and their land will be 20 feet into the beach. So you're now going to build from the bulkhead, that's your setback, or you're going to allow it to be the property line out on the beach?
But there's,
Because then you have CAFRA that,
if the city sells, if CAFRA allows you to put your bulkhead out where the property line is, then yeah, this allows you to measure your setback from the new further out bulkhead. That's what this does. But it always has. That's
not
no
a change.
That's not a change.
I thought John was talking about using not the bulkhead for coverage, but moving it all the way out. Right. So,
But Johann is
and it's
talking about
not-
setback.
But it's almost like the bay where all the land that's underwater, they can never use that beachfront land except for coverage. Wouldn't that then?
Not for coverage. We're not letting them use it for coverage.
Not letting. I thought you said we were letting.
We're suggesting that you get the benefit of your land that's outside the bulkhead just for your building coverage, so that you're not,
So you can use it.
you're not penalized on the size of your
Right, but not
house.
setbacks and not
Setbacks are
landscaping.
going to dictate that anyway.
No, I understand that, but then you also can end up with a much bulkier and filled-in lot.
It still has to meet the setback requirements.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Don't forget, we have a sliding scale of building coverage so that as your lot gets larger, the percentage building coverage gets smaller. On a 3,000 square foot lot, you're allowed 40% coverage. On a 7,000 square foot lot, you're only allowed 30% coverage, which is why, and by the way, what John is talking about is just exactly the way I've been interpreting it for 14 years now, but to codify it.
So if I go against
But I would add the option that you may use the larger lot into the beach for coverage, or you may use from the bulkhead only at your option, because it may be to your advantage to use the smaller lot.
To get a bigger
You
percentage.
may get a slightly larger house in some cases with a smaller lot.
Oh, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have objection to that.
Just put that option in.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's exactly the way I've been interpreting it.
And then the other condition, obviously, is if the property line is inside the bulkhead. There are some cases where the bulkhead is actually oceanward of your property line.
Right.
In that case, you don't, everything is measured from the property line
Correct.
as if you're a lot that is in the middle of the island.
No choice on that, yeah.
Let's see, Schedule B4, nobody had any comments. Chapter 103 bulkheads.
That changes the whole range.
That's the section where we're recommending bulkhead heights, beachfront being 13 in 88 datum. Anything bayfront that is against an A zone would be at elevation 9 in 88 datum. It takes away the fluctuation of the 7.5 to 9 that you currently have. And then anything adjacent to a V zone, we had recommended elevation 10. There was a comment, maybe I think from Tom, with regard to...
I think we talked about this today at a meeting about bulkhead heights. The city
Okay.
did, about going with an average of 7.5 to maybe 8, because a 9 foot is just way too high. It's just it's actually a wall.
It's high, and I think we talked about that last time I was here, but we remember with this study, what we're looking at is sustainability of the community and not so much zoning and view blockage impacts.
Excuse me, Roger, can we just leave it with the standing ordinances in place, the 7.5 to, I think, 9? Isn't it right now, the way it's written?
What was told to us this afternoon, it was in discussion, was that the bulkhead on the bay doesn't prevent flooding. I mean, discuss that a little bit if you could. It doesn't prevent flooding. It does help with wave action a little bit if there's going to be a storm that creates waves on the bay side, but it does not prevent flooding. Is that your understanding, or?
Well, I mean, a seamless bulkhead or grade elevation changes to a specific height helps prevent flooding. I mean, you can build. I mean, there's look at New Orleans. They build a dike around the community, and that's what keeps them from flooding. So, a continuous bulkhead around your island, and/or heights of existing land that happen to meet that elevation essentially create a flood barrier. Now, having said that, you could be hundreds and hundreds of years before you'd ever get to that. So it's a balancing act with regard to how high your bulkheads go, because it's a question of how impactful is it to the current conditions and the current neighbors, and how much of a negative is it going to have for the property owners.
You're talking sea level rise.
Yeah, correct.
Well, the study from Rutgers, the resiliency study, something like 2050, it's going to be 18 inches higher than it is now. I don't know. So that it is a flooding barrier.
Yeah, a bulkhead is absolutely a flooding barrier. Now, you can't just...
Unless Ventnor doesn't have a bulkhead.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You have to have a seamless closed cell to have it work 100%.
Well, all these proposals, the height of the houses on the beach and everything, this is all a 100-year plan. This is not instantaneous. We're not.
That's correct.
Right. So this is a going forward type thing. So it's not going to have a major automatic impact.
No, it's not. And if the community wants to try to bring bulkheads up, the range issue, my opinion of it is at the very minimum, you should bring the low end of the range up. Because I can tell you, I mean, you guys know, we design a lot of bulkheads in Margate. I don't ever remember the homeowner saying, let's go to 9. They all want to go to 7.5 because it gets the bulkhead out of the way and I can build my deck the way I want and it works with my house. Nobody goes to 9.
But nobody's interested in the floods coming later. I mean,
Exactly.
that's a community purpose.
That is exactly correct. So our recommendation of 9 on the lagoons and then higher on the bayfront is based on, look on the historic data. We had elevations that pushed 8 in floodwaters. So that elevation 9 gives you about a 12-inch freeboard above what happened during Sandy. If 10 people on the lagoon build their bulkhead at 9, are they going to have less flooding next year if we have another Sandy? No, they're not.
No, but that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here, is a long-term, 100-year, 200-year plan, whatever it is.
John, just a point of interest from a actuary type basis, I don't know if you can answer this, but if, for example, we made that 9 today,
right?
Actuarially, that would take, what, 25, 35 years to actually implement it?
100 years.
No, I'm saying to actually, as properties turn over.
That's what I'm saying.
Probably, honestly, Tom, longer. I mean, think about it.
That's 100 years, I'm saying.
Bulkheads have life in excess of 50 years.
So if we put it off, then we're just pushing that into the future. We'll be underwater in the bay before we catch up with the ordinance.
I'm not sure who raised the concern at the commission meeting, but
It was
raised by all of them, everyone.
It was raised by Abbott, and it was agreed to by
who lives on the bay?
Wahlberg. Abbott said it, and Wahlberg agreed with it. There are.
But this is not going to impact them. It's not going to impact. There's not going to be an immediate impact. This is over a long period of time.
Right. I mean, the way we looked at it is...
Master plan's done every 12 years.
We did take into account and think about the issue of how does it affect the neighbors, because it's going to create some issues. But your current ordinance allows you to go between 7.5 and 9. So I can right now go build my bulkhead at 9, and there's nothing that my neighbor can do about it, and it's probably the prudent thing to do if I'm worried about sustainability. All we're suggesting is take away that lower end. We're not asking you to go higher. We're just suggesting to take away the low end. So it's a judgment call. We can't make that decision for you. It's just when you look at what's been going on, when you look at everybody sea level rises, the new hot topic.
Is this in 175?
Turn your mic on, Roger.
I'm talking loud. Is this in 175 or in a different? But isn't it also in 175 somewhere, the height of bulkheads?
I don't think it is.
So my question would be, if the board recommended minimum of 10 and 9, could it be subject to a variance, where somebody could come into this board and say, I want it to be lower? Or could you not get a variance from Chapter 103?
I can tell you that in other land use ordinances, or other ordinances that we work with, both the bulkhead ordinance and the flood damage prevention ordinance, in some of them, not all of them, but in some of them, they do have a provision for allowing you to request a variance from the zoning or planning board, in this case, combined board.
Wouldn't that be a good compromise position? That you go with the 10 and the 9, and even the 13, and allow for a variance, where they can come in and say, you're affecting my view, you're ruining my house, whatever, and you can...
But then aren't you defeating the flood plan?
So you turn down the variance. It's just a variance request.
Why give them the option? Is right, Rob.
So it can leak in on your property and affect the property next door.
But none of this has anything to do with our insurance rating. the height of the bulkhead.
That's not the reason that we're doing it. We're doing it so
I don't
God
think the
doesn't
board,
flood.
I don't think the commission will accept 9 feet
Well,
after today's
that's-
meeting.
They can make their decision, but
We can make the
They can do
recommendation.
that. They can do that. They can turn it.
let me just throw this out there so we can drag the meeting on longer. How about just 9 feet everywhere?
But you mean everywhere on the bayfront?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have objection to that.
And you get rid of a step on the promenade,
There you go.
don't you?
Actually, no,
Why not?
because then they'd have to put a rail up on, to get to that 42 inch.
No,
Yeah, but if
the
we
42
were
inch would be
recommending
a foot lower.
That bulkhead would have had to be a 10. I think,
No, if that bulkhead goes to
if it goes to
9,
9, then we could bring the promenade elevation a slightly lower, you're right.
a foot,
Yeah.
right, 8 inches instead of 18 inches.
So I don't have objection to that. The reason that we went with the 10-foot against the V zones is because that's where you are subject to a wave action of 1 to 3 feet. But
Every
I don't-
100 years, we can deal with it.
Right. I don't have objection to all of the bayfront being 9.
I object
As a
to it staying as it is. I think we're shirking our responsibility.
Have a little rail instead of 42 inches.
I agree with you there, I'm fine with 9 on the
9 all the way.
Does anybody want to stay as it is, like the commission wants?
With the 10 and the 9?
No, 7 to 9. The commission wants to leave it like it is,
No. Just make it all 9.
all 9.
I don't see any.
Okay. Leave it 9 everywhere. And that's our compromise to the commission.
And they'll do what they want.
Right,
Yeah, these are just a recommendation.
right.
Is that it?
Yeah, but it's now on the record, the planning board, this is what we recommend for sustainability into the future and the livelihood of our children and our children's children.
Boy, you're making it hard for them to go against that.
You want that exact wording and...
Did you get apple pie in there somewhere?
Does this doesn't make the minutes, does it?
God bless
For the
America.
good of all the citizens of Margate.
Wrap it up. There's a video. Is he done? Are you done, Bill?
I say the whole public has left. Thank God excuse me.
Is that it?
One last minor thing. Chapter 145 in the flood damage prevention ordinance, Clem brought up the question of what does an attendant utility mean? And interestingly enough, that's in like every flood damage prevention ordinance that we deal with, and there's always question as to what exactly that means. And I actually made a note here to ask Jimmy the question as to how you interpret that. And based on the towns that we work in, the way that they look at that is exactly what you mentioned, is that it's the heating systems, it's the ductwork, it's those elements, but it's obviously not a sewer line coming from up above, from underground. It's your electrical meter, your electric panel, those are the items that are considered attendant utilities. Jim, I don't know if you have a different interpretation of how that's looked at.
What year is that document you have? Because there's 2 different
This is
flood
your
dams.
current-
Is the new one that just was adopted 2013?
Yeah.
They were right in the midst of revising that. Can you hold off on that?
I think you should stay out of this one.
Perfect.
Because, yeah, that's
That's
it's
great.
underway elsewhere.
Yeah, just let that go.
Back to the bulkhead.
Well, Jimmy, can we back up for 1 second? We can stay out of it altogether, but just remember, the reason that this is even in here is because we made the recommendation to take the oceanfront lots to 3 feet above base flood for their finished floors
Where did you do that? Right here?
in this section.
Yeah.
We can stay out of that totally, though.
They're 3 feet above the V zone standard?
3 feet above the minimum base flood of wherever the property
Well,
is.
Instead of
it would
2
be the
feet.
ABFE, and the ABFE at the beach block is 12, so it'd be 15 foot.
That's pretty high. That's pretty damn high.
Not in 100 years.
Because John, we're at ABFE plus 1, so that would be 12, that would be 13. Right, Roger?
Yeah, my opinion is that that's not high enough. On the oceanfront, the oceanfront properties took a beating. Even with new bulkheads at good heights, they took an absolute beating when it came to the oceanfront. Those oceanfront homes beat those waves down, and the next property in was just fine. So that's why we made that recommendation. And we talked about this last time.
What are you talking about? What properties got damaged? In Margate?
Not so much in Margate.
No, 10 properties got ruined in Margate and I got photos of them. The only ones that got damaged were just the sliding glass doors got pushed in. That was it.
But we can leave this section alone, I'm fine with that.
So you're backing down on the extra foot on the beachfront then? Is that what you're saying?
Just leave it like everybody else.
2 foot?
ABFE plus 1.
Right. Okay.
I'm fine with that.
You okay, Joe?
Yep, and that,
Okay.
yep, that's the last one.
Open to the public.
No, I just had, if you could put the wording in there somehow that the 9-foot bulkhead, people can build to that now. All we're doing is codifying it, that they don't have the option of going lower, that they can't stop people from building at 9 feet. You understand what I'm saying, to make it an easier sell?
Yeah, we're removing the minimum range and just going with what is the current maximum
What is the
permitted.
current? Yes.
Yeah,
So we're not raising anything.
correct.
Wouldn't that be making the minimum 9 feet?
Well, he said minimum and maximum, 9.
No, just
Minimum of 9
instead
and
of a
max
range,
is
it's
9?
9.
Okay,
Minimum
now
and
I'm
max.
saying that.
Yeah, there's no more minimum and max. It's, you build your bulkhead at 9. And we do have language in there to allow a 3-inch deviation either direction from a constructability standpoint.
Which you're allowed to do now? Okay. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment? No one's here, the public portion is closed. How can we, Roger, how can we do this?
My thought now is that, first of all, the board has agreed to, we've gone through all the changes, and there's been general agreement. I would like the board to take an action which would have 2 parts. Number 1, on those parts that are not ordinance sensitive, the board supports and recommends the study, adopts the study, essentially as a study of use for the city. And by the way, so you should know, the first chapter about the bayfront, the bathymetric studies that they've done in the bay, we have already used that data with our experts to support the dredging program that we're pushing with the state. That data has been immensely helpful already. We've already used the data on the beachfront bulkheads and decks as a major exhibit in our latest legal document that we submitted to the federal judge on the dune
Dune opposition.
opposition. So these studies have already been very helpful, and they will continue to be so. But I'd like the board, if it wants, to adopt, embrace, Stanley, whatever you say is the correct word, the study in its entirety. Secondly, I'd like the board to take those aspects of the study which are changes to the zoning or other ordinances, to recommend those changes to the commission for changing the ordinance. 2 things that Ponzio Mazer has to do is update the book based on today's, John, is to update this book based on these conversations, and to take the zoning stuff and make it ordinance ready, so that we can just hand it to Scott Abbott, and he can put it it'll be in ordinance language. This stuff could be passed within, 4, 5, 6 weeks, if you're agreeable to do that. And then we're done, essentially done.
John,
Yes.
will this be able to be uploaded onto the website? Okay.
We provide to Roger or whoever, if you have uploaded, yes.
Do you have a disc or something for it to be uploaded, or you're going to scan?
Well, I mean, we want to make changes for you.
Right, but that's, when it's done.
Yeah, it's not a large document.
Okay.
Email it to Roger or whoever, and it can be up.
Okay,
And
because
if
that's
you
been
give us a disc,
requested.
we could manufacture, we could reproduce them and hand them out if people came in and wanted it, so we didn't have to give them out a big book, right?
At $40 a book.
Okay.
I would say just give them a disc.
Send it to me, too.
Right. But I also think we should have about a dozen or so bound final version books, in City Hall for whatever purpose. Yeah, of the completely revised book, yeah, about a dozen.
We have, you had a few comments about the clarity of some of the plans and things. We have updated that, so yes, we will.
Okay.
We'll give you some books.
Okay, and if the board adopts, or whatever Stanley is going to say is the correct language, this study today, I'd like you to put on the cover page that action took place by this board, so it's actually imprinted in the book. Okay? All right.
Okay, it's yours. As Roger said, technically and legally, it's a recommendation to City Commission to adopt the study as set forth with the modifications that are going to be made, as well as recommending the changes that the board has modified slightly tonight to the ordinances as set forth at tonight's meeting. So it's two parts.
So it's a resolution of recommendation?
That's called a recommendation, actually. I draft it, I send it to the city clerk, and I attach whatever provisions are, and then they give it to the commission under the municipal land use law. Yep.
So would you read out loud what I'm asking for a motion for?
Motion for the board to recommend the study dated September 17, 2015, and then a new date as amended in its entirety. And also, second part of the recommendation is for the board to recommend that the changes to the ordinances that we talked about tonight as modified to the commission.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Who? Jim? We need reasons or yes, no? Yes, no answers. Yes.
It's just a yes.
Just yes, no.
Yeah, it's just a yes or no.
Tom Collins?
Yes.
Clem Wozleski? Mike Richmond?
Yes.
Jim Galantino?
Yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
Yes.
Mike Cristaldi?
Yes.
David Carter?
Yes.
Joe DiGirolamo?
Yes.
Rich Patterson?
Yes.
Okay.
It passes 9-0.
I just can't do it. Motion for the meeting to be adjourned?
Jim just made a motion.
I second it. No, it was the two-part motion.
It was combined.
Thank you very much. You did a great job, John. Thank you.
Both combined?
I like how you approached it and the discussion. It worked out well.
Anybody want to get rid of their books?
When's the next meeting, Mr. Chairman?
2 weeks.
November 19th?
Did you get your...
All right.
Did everybody get these?
It was a long day.
You want the books?
And I got a big Thanksgiving.